Thank you, Dean Robbins. It is such a pleasure to be here with you all today. As Dean Robbins mentioned, I'm Erin Bolson, a PhD student here at UW-Madison. As someone who came from the corporate world to academia, I was particularly interested in creating more opportunities for students to learn about the impact they can have on sustainability through corporate positions, which is why I'm so excited to have these panelists here with us today, who are making an impact. Today's discussion will focus on the energy transition, exploring how these very different companies are taking action and the role they play in the overall energy transition. We'll also explore opportunities for students who are interested in these areas. First, we'll hear some introductory comments from each panelist and move into some moderated questions. Then we'll have time for just a few audience questions at the end. I'd like to welcome Louis Liu, Sustainability Project Engineer from Kohler Power Systems. Brett Wetzel, Vice President of Sustainability and Innovation at US Venture. And Ashley Henderson, Energy Solutions and Control Specialist at Trane. Louis, would you please like to introduce yourself first and expand on how you got into the field you're in?
Yeah, sure. Can people hear me? Did I turn on? No?
There you go. Oh, you added that.
Test, test. Perfect. Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Louis Liu. I'm a sustainability project engineer with Kohler Power System, which is one of the actually largest industrial generators provider globally. My role is leading a design for environment program for our new product development project with the engineering team. So I help, essentially what I mean is I try to bring in a cross-functional team together and helping understand what can we do to reduce the life cycle impact of our product and also support some of the carbon accounting work to help calculate the greenhouse gas emission that come into the embodied carbon creating our product as well as the scope 3 emission for our business. So the indirect value chain before it get to our facility as well as the downstream of it. I also convene a sustainability task force and a sustainability committee to really drive the governance framework as well as the culture within our organization for corporate sustainability and trying to map out what that strategy and roadmap look like. So quickly on how did I get here, want to trace it back to where I was from. I was made in China, born and raised in a major southern city called Guangzhou with a population of 15 million, just a little bit bigger than Madison, about 3 times the population of Wisconsin. But I came here, I guess before I came here, my aha moment or spark, when people ask me, why do you want to work in sustainability? I recall a moment when I was about age 14, after dinner, go for a walk with my mom and look up in the sky. And it surprised me, it never occurred to me the question, but I was wondering why I couldn't see the stars. And the realization of the severe air and light pollution that directly caused that has sparked something in me that made me want to make change, even though I don't know how. But fast forward, I think part of that how is by pursuing an engineering degree at UW-Madison. I became a bachelor. Came here in 2014, joined the UW marching band, played trumpet for a couple years, but studied abroad and joined a number of student organizations, co-chairing an energy hub, organizing some energy conference on campus, participating in West Wind as a mechanical lead for our collegiate wind competition for my senior design year. So that really helped build that interest and momentum on sustainability over years. And after I graduate, I didn't go to Kohler right away. Actually, I worked for a general contractor called C.G. Schmidt for 2.5 years as the MEP engineer. So I work with mechanical, electrical, plumbing, fire protection trades in the pre-construction, help with the budgeting, planning, scoping of a project. And it's during that time, I tap into a little more on the corporate environmental responsibility. I help our Madison office enroll in community share solar with MG&E. I help certify our office with a well health and safety certification during the pandemic when people were trying to figure out how to have a safe space in the work environment. And that really made me want to do more, and which is why I started looking around and finding that Kohler was looking for a full-time sustainability project engineer to combine that engineering background, working with the engineering product team, but also the people person that can convene broader stakeholders together to trying to drive that culture and drive that corporate sustainability. So really honored to be here, to be invited to join you all for the discussions. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. Hey, everybody. I'm Brett Wetzel, and I'm very excited to be here, especially when I tell you my background, which quite different than that. But I lead our internal sustainability efforts and work with our innovation teams at US Venture. So US Venture is often one of those names that people, sometimes in Wisconsin, people will recognize it. Otherwise, people always ask, well, what is it? And actually, our company started 70 years ago when two brothers started hauling fuel oil in Appleton, Wisconsin. So, fuel oil, the equivalent of diesel. Our company is still privately held and family owned, and our neighborhood just isn't in Appleton anymore. We have 6 or 7 businesses now that are across the US, and some of them actually span into global markets too. So the intersection of energy and transportation, our energy team does still distribute diesel and gasoline, but it's into biofuels and renewable natural gas development. So perfect place like Wisconsin to capture methane and turn it into something usable. Our AutoForce division is the second largest tire distributor now in the US. That was a third brother that joined the business and said, I'll buy 1 load of tires. I don't know where I'm gonna store it. It's gonna go in a garage. Now it's the second largest tire distributor. And in that area, we're actually looking at end-of-life tire solutions. So how can we be part of the solution to deliver the tires out and bring them back in? I came out of our breakthrough business unit, which is really working with the large shippers of the world in transportation on managing their fuel and their emissions. And we have a couple other technology companies. Our newest company is actually in water rights and responsible water management in Colorado in the West. So it's been continued to grow, and it's been really exciting to be a part of that journey. So my background of how I got to where I came from, I was born and raised in Green Bay, Wisconsin. I went out to change the world as a high school math teacher. Did high school math for 5 years, and still really enjoyed the teaching part. I think sometimes the budgetary part is what kind of gets in the way. So I applied at one company, and that was Breakthrough under the US Venture umbrella. And very quickly, I started working with a company that was doing alternative energy. And I knew right away, this is the business version. This is making a difference. This feels like teaching. And that was really the roots of when I started help develop the emissions management solution that we work with a lot of the food and beverage companies there, and continue to just kind of move within the organization, kind of within internally, eventually to leading our own internal sustainability and innovation route. So it gives me a chance to actually make a difference for us on our internal sustainability within emissions and just the behaviors that we have, and also work with our innovation teams on what about our products that we continue to try to find, how do we make sure these are more sustainable out there, and how do we listen to customers to figure out how can we be a part of the solution, which I know will be part of the energy transition conversation.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Ashley Henderson. I work for Trane, which is a part of Trane Technologies, which also has Thermo King as one of our sister brands in there as well. And on the Trane side, which is the commercial heating, cooling, ventilation, and air conditioning portion, or HVAC, a lot of what we do is really driving towards how do we help our customers. Trane Technologies as a whole has set some pretty lofty goals. And when we were spun off in the end of 2019 from Ingersoll Rand, we really announced that we were going to be part of what we called our Gigaton Challenge. And so what we wanted to do was take the 2030 idea and say, we can do better than that. We are better than that. And we have a way to capture the market, not just with what we can do for ourselves with regards to manufacturing and refrigerants that we're developing and putting into the market, but also with how we look at transportation. Thermo King, what that is really, it's an air conditioning for trucks. So it allows them not to have to be idling and polluting while they're in between on a rest or waiting for shipments to come in. So And so for us, it's really about looking at, the Gigaton Challenge for us is how do we help reduce the carbon emissions by 1 full metric ton across the country. So that for us is Scope 1, Scope 2, and Scope 3. And kind of what Lewis was talking about, looking at, as we're sending products out, what are those products made of? How can we also help with some of the end-of-life cycle pieces with bringing them back to us, or recycling it, or recycling the materials that we're using and having them come back and ship out a new product in it. And then working with building owners and institutions about what does their carbon footprint look like? What are their goals, and how can we help them maybe take their goals to the next level, like here at the university, or with an organization that's just trying to get off the ground with understanding where do they get started, how do they get started, what is involved, and what does it mean for them as an organization, and then also taking at that next step and how can they market it? How can they help recruit new people to come work for them? How can they bring new people into their facility? And then how can they turn that around and maybe increase the leases and help capture a higher net worth type of individual as a client. And how I got here is definitely a different path than the traditional Trane path. Most of the people that I work with are mechanical engineers. A large portion of them are all Madison graduates as well. But my background's in finance and economics. I went to the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee and started off initially and wanted to be a financial analyst, which quickly realized was not going to be the best fit for me. You realize when you go into school and you think that that's where your path is and that's what you want to do, and all of a sudden I'm like, well, wait a second. An analyst sits in front of a computer and does models all day long. So that was a hard pass. So I started working for an organization that did executive conferences, and it allowed me an opportunity to kind of get into the sales field, but also gain a lot of experience and see what was out there. And the events that they had me working on were all energy-based. So it was demand response. So figuring out how do we, transfer loads during peak events so that we don't have, Beyonce turning off the lights during the Super Bowl. And then also looking at, how do we kind of transfer some of those for a large power outage? How do we look at a microgrid? How do we look at what different types of energy storage look like for a city, a campus, a state, an individual building? And from there, kind of got me into similar to Brett, wanting to be in front of it and a part of it versus being behind the scenes. And so then that led me to Trane, and I'm part of our Milwaukee office, which we've got all around kind of here. Traditionally, a lot of people think of Trane, they think of lacrosse, and that's still where we do a large part of all of our large centrifugal manufacturing. But we've got offices all around the country and around the world trying to help reduce the energy intensity. So, thank you.
Well, thank you for the nice introductions. And just as a warm-up, we'll start with Lewis. Can you start by briefly telling us what comes to your mind in your organization when you hear the word sustainability, and what are the big focus areas for you? And you can start, and we'll have everybody answer this, please.
Sure. So sustainability is really a broad term that covers many different things, right? It's way beyond just the greenhouse gas reduction. It got to water and stewardship and anything else. And many of you are known for Kohler for the kitchen and bath products. So Kohler is definitely a water steward in trying to find out innovative way to design product that reduce the water consumption and supporting developing country on access to water as well. But I'm not going to talk about water today because I represent the energy, the power generation business. So I'm going to talk more on the generator, right? So I actually mentioned that Beyonce can, have the light turn out at the concert. Want to make sure that it doesn't happen. And what happened is a lot of people will use industrial generators for event like that. And also we support a lot of the mission critical facility around the world. So we provide industrial generator go anywhere from 10 kilowatt to 4,000 kW. And put that in perspective, if you run that 4,000 kW generator for 1 hour, that's enough to power 4.5 homes for an entire month. And those generators going into healthcare, hospital, schools, airports, water treatment facility, and the rapidly growing data center industry. So when it comes to sustainability, when you ask what I think about right now, everything I feel like I'm hearing a lot at work is how do we meet the demand for data center industry? It has grown significantly over the last couple of years because of the demand of remote working, streaming, everything online during the pandemic, and then the takeoff of the artificial intelligence, the machine learning, the auto-driving vehicles, the cryptocurrency, everything that you do with data, you need a place to process the storage to calculate. And the data center is booming in a way that is too fast for a lot of the suppliers to be able to catch up, including us. So providing industrial generator, the lead time, if you order a generator now, is going to be much longer than it would for a couple of years ago. So part of the challenge is how do you increase the throughput, but also realizing there's going to be a lot of impact that come with running these generators, right? How can we make it more sustainable? Because nowadays, most common type of industrial generator that use on those facilities that have a fuel that can last for a long time are a diesel generator, right? So it would take a while to transition toward alternative energy, but we are trying to take a step to proactively make those products available for our clients, and also looking at solutions that we can help them reduce impact. I'll give you a couple examples. Very recently, we launched a very exciting project. Is the first hydrogen fuel cell generator that we produce. So we collaborate with Toyota, leveraging their fuel cell technology to use hydrogen as a fuel source to generate electricity. So our first model that we created is a 100 kW, and our very first product is going to install at a healthcare facility in Washington State actually this year. So super exciting, making that available, but the challenge that comes with it is really the availability of these renewable fuel source, especially how you create these hydrogen. There's a whole color spectrum of green, blue, yellow, pink, depending on what kind of energy that's going into creating them. So that's a challenge, but we are making that product available to our clients. Another thing that we focus on to how to reduce the impact when our customer using our current generators. So we have certified all of our industrial generators be able to run on hydro-treated vegetable oils, which is a type of more renewable source of fuel that performs similar to diesel, but it's made out of vegetable oil and animal fats, and it uses hydrogen as a method to process it. And that is more readily available in Europe than in the US, but at least we are making our entire family of industrial generator run on diesel be able to use that as an alternative fuel. And actually our manufacturing facility in France, which account for about 40% of our global production, have switched over the entire facility fuel consumption using HVO fuel instead of diesel. And last but not least, we rolled out a conscious care maintenance program recently. Essentially, it's helping operators of these generators to reduce their test time, because actually, majority of time for these emergency backup generators are actually for testing purposes. They're run monthly to making sure there's no residual fuel, backup in the system that cause something that could cause wet stacking effect. So they have to burn it off every month, and they have to run those testing in the loaded cycle. But we work with our engine suppliers to improve the technology to avoid the wet stacking effect from happening. So for our KD series generator, you can actually only test it every 4 months with no load and still be able to maintain the function of your product. So we're finding different ways to trying to reduce the operational side of the impact of our product, and we're also trying to do more carbon accounting, creating environmental product declaration for our product as well for the upstream embodied carbon that going into the product to help communicate that impact transparently. So.
Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah.
Brett?
So sustainability, and I'll actually probably use both my titles, sustainability and innovation. For our company, it actually fits right in with one of our visions, which is finding a better way. And when we put those two things together and we think about finding a better way, it's looking for cool things and the really big things like solar projects. It's looking for things, actually, the HVO or renewable diesel, using it in our fleets. But I think some of the biggest things we find for sustainability are the small behaviors that we do every day. So the things that are happening in the offices, it sounds really silly, but put a light sensor on it, turn the light off, like the energy efficiency things that we all learned as a kid. Those are all some of those things that are there. And for us, it's, my math background, and I think a lot of ours looking at the math side is like, you can see it in the numbers now, but it still is those smallest things that stack up to bigger than sometimes those really big size of prize. And I will say for us, when we think about that, we actually are developing our own employee engagement app that we're hoping is going to work to try to take a look at our personal footprints. So not just inside of work, but also at home, what does it really mean for you? And one of those tips, maybe a tip to take today if those don't know, if you don't know of the Focus on Energy program, thinking about finding a better way, you can order your own free energy kit at home. It's one small way to reduce, get LED lights, low flow things. So it's for us, sustainability is the big things, but a lot on those little things.
Thanks, Ashley.
And for us, sustainability is a couple different pieces. I mean, we all had, there are QR codes up there a little bit ago, and that takes takes you to each of our sustainability pages, and you can look up, what we're doing as a larger corporation. But, as Trane, we see it as just what we do. It kind of goes back to like what Brett was talking about. It's part of the innovation. It's a part of how can we help do better, because sustainability is no longer something that you have to sacrifice in order to continue to drive profit, nor is it something that is going to, it has created such a great thing for us with how we're going to market, how we're looking at what we're driving our forces, how we're having different conversations with our customers, how we engage with our engineers or general contractors when we're talking about potential projects, and looking at always making sure we're saying, have you looked at what's at Focus on Energy? Have you checked into what other tax credits could be available? Is there a different way to help make your vision of your sustainable project or a project that you want to be able to happen? How can we help you make that as an affordable, viable option with looking at what's out there and available? So, as we kind of talked about here, it starts from us as people, and we went through and really changed and looked at all of our facilities, all of our manufacturing spaces. What are they doing with regards to sustainability? How are they managing the waste that are coming off of places, and looking at that and weaving it into our sustainable stewardship from that, and then coming down to, as it's sending out, how do we send it out and help capture some of those embodied carbons? How do we help create a sustainability report around one of our pieces of equipment so we can better understand what that individual impact is as far as its full life cycle goes? And then sitting down and kind of talked about this a little bit earlier, is really helping people understand what the impact of their building is. Most of us up here are really building focused and looking at, okay, have we turned the lights off? I heard someone say, as a parent, you're like the best, which I'm not, but as a parent, you're like the best energy auditor. You go around and you walk in the door and you turn off all of the lights. And it made me laugh because I just reminded my mother always saying, as you walked out of the room, she was like, well, did you turn the lights off? And like 9 out of 10 times as a kid, you walked back in and turned the lights off, because whatever was so exciting, you couldn't turn the lights off. And you kind of take that moment, and if you harness that excitement for wherever you were going to go for a kid, for us, it's come into what we do as sustainability. Like, you get so excited about some of these projects that you're working on and sharing them with customers that, we want to make sure that we're, taking the time to quote unquote turn the lights off. Like, we dotted our I's, crossed our T's, and shown you what your building can do for you. Turning your building into an asset. It shouldn't be, just something that gets depreciated on the books. It should be something that is able to work for you and help, kind of looking at like what Lewis was talking about with AI. Looking at how does, some of that, the really cool learning tools come into play of optimizing your building and helping it better manage itself so that you have the time to, help set up some of those sustainability paths that you're working on and be more engaged in the community and look at what else, because as, the workforce continues to age, no one's job seems to get smaller. Everyone's job seems to get bigger and busier. And so how can we really help you not have to worry about what's going on inside your facility, making sure that your HVAC system is operating as it should. What are we doing to look at it from that piece of it? And that's where kind of some of those partnerships with Focus on Energy or looking at tax credits can really help you take a look sustainably and take a bite out of maybe that scary price of doing a energy audit or some retro commissioning.
Thank you, Ashley. Okay, now I'd like to move into some broad energy-related questions. As many people have heard, there are new regulations, such as in California and the EU, that are changing the reporting requirements and sustainability landscape that companies need to operate in. Could you share some thoughts about how these recent and forthcoming regulations are changing your operations? We'd love to hear both about the challenges and any benefits they might confer in the near or long term. Brett, why don't we start with you?
Perfect. Yeah, so as a private company and for our own internal sustainability journey, actually last year was our first sustainability report. And our company, I had mentioned it, grown pretty significantly. We're over 4,500 employees, and that is much larger than we were before with a bunch of extra businesses. So I think the legislation, when you think about it in the short term, especially for private companies, it seems like a really tall task. There's a lot more things that we wanted to tell about our story, the things we're doing in the community and in energy. A lot of that is going to get more streamlined and consistent. And I think what's we're trying to do every day when we work with our businesses is there is the opportunity. Number one, it'll bring consistency in how we can talk about what we're doing. People can compare it apples to apples. And it really, at the end of the day for sustainability, it really does show how sustainability can come with the business and not separate from the business. Ashley had mentioned too, talking with other folks that are out there, with your suppliers, with your customers. This really does help that to say, okay, we're all in this together. Like, how can we do this? And if I put myself in a student's shoes, it provides the perfect opportunity of a lot of companies that are going to have big challenges in just understanding what's out there. And how can you be a part of that to really help, even just up the game a little bit of that education to be a part of the solution when so many companies will probably have a big challenge in front of them.
Thank you, Brett. Ashley, how about you?
Yeah. So for us as a global manufacturer, one of the things that's unique is that we manufacture where our products are going to go. So most of our U.S. manufacturing for the U.S. in North America takes place within the United States. We have some in Canada, some in Mexico, depending on what's applicable. So we, when you look at the size of a state like California, Washington, Oregon, New York, that have really made some progressive and aggressive sustainability statements out there, as well as requirements. And an organization is not, we're not going to do business for one state. We're going to do business for everybody. So as we as Trane have made our sustainability commitment, we're going to manufacture for everybody. Because Wisconsin really enjoys being in 2015 for building codes, does not mean that we're going to say, okay, let's hold on. We don't need to manufacture that for Wisconsin. We're going to manufacture this for California and that for Oregon and that for Arkansas. No, it's not. Number one, it's not sustainable. Okay. Number two, the world is moving forward. So we as an organization are going to move forward with it. And looking at it from a student's piece of the pie, sustainability isn't just happening with, your manager or director of sustainability. It's happening in every single business stream. From looking at, how products are secured, supplied, implemented, and looking at it from a creative piece of the puzzle. One of my favorite places that does a really good job is the Kohler, I can't think of the lab that you guys have. That does,
Waste Lab.
Waste Lab,
yep.
Thank you. You guys, they do an incredible job with really advertising it and saying, okay, well, this is our leftover product. How can we turn this into something that can now be shared and produced and utilized that would have before that been a waste product? So I think there's a lot of opportunity out there, and the regulations are really going to help, from my perspective, help bring everybody up to a playing field. And then it also helps provide some guidelines around reporting. Because right now, you could really almost say anything you want, tie a little green ribbon around it, and now you're sustainable. And I think this will really help distinguish those who are being stewards versus those that are doing marketing.
Thank you. Louis, how about you?
No, I absolutely agree with both Brett and Ashley on the point. And it's really an interesting time because all of these businesses are asked, to the point, is very globalized production wherever you are, even though you may only have a part of the operation in certain region, but then your entire company is going to get impacted and they have to comply. So specifically, European CSRD, Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, is asking all of these companies to disclose not only their direct emissions, Scope 1, indirect emissions, Scope 2, and Scope 3 throughout the value chain. They also ask you to talk about what is your impact to marine, to water usage, what is your impact to circular economy, what is your double materiality. So not only your business impact to the greater environment, but how is climate crisis going to impact your viability as a business as well? So all of these businesses are under pressure to really do that assessment, to do that benchmarking, which I think is an opportunity because a lot of people, they don't really have an exact roadmap, what they need to do, what they have to, and how they get there. I think these well-planned out legislation and regulation compliance are making all the business are following a similar structure to do that internal assessment. What are the environmental metrics or material to my business operation, and what is my responsibility to reduce the impact for them? I think it definitely set people in the same playing ground, but the challenge come with it's a lot of the data processing analysis, and when it comes to Scope 3 emission, value chain emission, it's really difficult to quantify. So the carbon accounting piece is really a challenge for a lot of business, including ours, because if you think about a generator, there are more than 10,000 individual components that go into it. So how do you quantify the carbon footprint of building a generator, right? The angle, what they're trying to get to is, encouraging all of these manufacturers to be able to, give you something maybe like a nutrition label that you see on a grocery that you buy, right? Be able to tell you what the nutrition exactly break down. That's what the Environmental Product Declaration, EPD, intended to do. But it's very difficult right now for our equipment manufacturer like HVAC equipment and generator to be able to do that level of life cycle assessment and produce that. It's more available for some of the building materials. If you're familiar with the built environment, the raw material, aluminum, steel, concrete, those are a little easier to get to those level, but when you have 6, 7 tiers of different suppliers and the loss in the communication, it's really hard to get to that level, and then you have to make a lot of assumption for it, so where's the accuracy? So I think it's still a process, working practice for globally, how do companies account for their impact and disclose and using methodology that can really give you the apple-to-apple comparison. It's something that we're actively working through.
Thank you, Louis.
Yep.
Okay, diving more specifically into energy, Wisconsin has a goal of 100% carbon-free electricity by 2050, and at the federal level, Biden has made a goal of carbon pollution-free electricity sector by 2035. Each of you come from companies that provide very different products and services. Please tell us how your companies are part of the energy transition. What role will they play as we try to meet both state and federal requirements? And let's start with you, Ashley.
Yeah, so those are, you first hear of them, they're lofty goals. And that's kind of the way I felt when we announced our Gigaton Challenge. Like, whoa, really? How are we gonna get there? And that wasn't the piece of the puzzle that, people get obsessed with. How are we going to get there? And it's important to see how that roadmap can be. But I think it's also really important for everyone to look at what is their role to get there. As Trane and I talked about earlier, we're a huge part of, right now there's a huge refrigerant transition that's happening, which unless you're in the HVAC industry, you're going to have absolutely almost zero knowledge of, unless someone happened to mention it in casual conversation. Doesn't come up a lot. So it's a huge process as part of us going through, what are these, if there were to be a refrigerant leak, what does that impact? Well, how do we do the reporting? How do we help with the transportation of it? How do we help the safety of it? And that's a huge piece of, reducing the impact of that individual piece of equipment. And then looking at what are the refrigerants that are specific to each individual piece of equipment, because it's based on pressure and how are we going to make the most efficient product without compromising what we have here. So then looking at, okay, so we've got that, but then what else are we going to do with regards to reporting? We're very lucky that as Trane, we have Trane Technologies that has a huge group that is focused on supply chain reporting, that's focused on our energy and sustainability outreach and reporting. And everything that we do as a corporation, we lead with that in mind. And we help others, through what we call, challenge possible. It takes a look at what can we do to help, reduce food waste? What can we do to help reduce, an environmental impact of X? And looking at what else can we do as, then bringing it into each individual office. And that's where you kind of look at, does what I do matter? Does what I do have an impact? And I think it's important that as we kind of look at the goals that have been laid out there, yes, they are lofty. Yes, we can get obsessed with, well, how are we going to get there if we don't have a renewable enough grid? How are we going to get there if we've got this going on in the legislature? How are we going to get there if only 5 companies are really interested in this? But it's really about what can you do as the individual, and then how can you help uplift everybody else around you. And I think that's the piece that we as Trane really help do, as obviously helping me do, but helping everyone else do, so that we can get there and figure out where do we get there, and then how do we kind of report out of what we're doing. So.
Thank you, Ashley. Louis, can you please answer?
Sure. I think one of the challenge when you're trying to set target, trying to set a reduction goal, when you're in an industry that is booming at a really rapid rate, it's difficult, right? Because you are growing. I give you some number for context. The data center industry in 2022, they draw in electricity consumption about 460 terawatt hour in a year, and that's equivalent to about 2 to 3% of global electricity. And emit equivalent amount of emission, about 2 to 3 of greenhouse gas emission. Put that in perspective, that's the entire commercial aviation industry combined. Is about that. And the data center industry is about to scale, is projected to scale threefold within the next 5 to 10 years. So how do you set reduction goal? How do you do energy transition while you're constantly expanding and growing? That's a challenge. And I think the key here is really collaboration across the industry. It's going beyond just what you're doing as an individual business, but collectively as an industry to push the boundary. And I could give you another example. So I work with IMAX Climate Accord, which is a data center association, one of the equipment working group that we are bringing people from different part of the data center stakeholder, from the operator, from the co-location operators and manufacturers, to trying to create case study and methodology to explain to other business what are some of the different ways we can do carbon accounting, right? You can do the full-blown life cycle assessment, creating EPD. You can do economic-based calculation. If you don't have that resource yet, you can do TM65, which is a simplified tool to help you to account for the equipment impact without deep diving, right? Providing example to showing what you could do to approach this challenge and providing guidance for our suppliers, for our operators, I think it's an important way. And that commitment, that positive competition, when everybody is doing something and committing to a climate pledge that put pressure on other businesses as well. So we want more positive pressure like this, but we also want more collaboration and sharing. I do see sustainability as a topic that really give everybody a chance to share what they are doing and lift everybody else up, because you are not directly competing. In a sense, right? Your competitors who wanted to be show off that you are better than others, but at the end of the day, we're all trying to get to the same common goal. It's like an analogy of running a marathon. We have the same finish line that we need to get to. It just, some people may be faster, slower, but then the standard, volunteering standard and the regulation is, if you think of it as the cutoff of the rate, is pushing everybody ahead and making sure you comply and be able to get to the goal that the government and countries are committed to.
Thanks. That's a great analogy. Thank you. All right, Brett, can you please respond?
Yeah, awesome. And I know a lot of those are on the electricity side, and where we sit a lot on the transportation side. It's really for us trying to help support. Actually, transportation is the #1 emitting sector in the U.S. Based off of information from the EIA. But for us, it's finding those solutions, whether that's biofuels, biogenic fuels, or working with companies, and this is something that actually supports some of the electrification stuff, is sometimes the best mile is the one not driven, if you think about it that way. So the intelligence of how do you just reduce on that side as well. So for us, we actually are even looking at electrification solutions, which is different than the refined products and the biofuels we've done before, to try to help support companies to move forward. I think, when we think about the electricity goals too, I'm excited. Like the things, all those little things that can continue to bring it down are going to be really good for the entire industry. And we're also looking at, I think we have about to have 3 on-site solar projects. So it's even, how do we continue to just help ourselves? And our companies love it because in the long run, it reduces operating costs. It does a lot of things like that. So, it's kind of nice when all those wins start stacking up. And for us on the transportation side, it's, hey, every little one helps, because vehicles take a lot of energy. Just like Lewis was saying, the data centers take a lot of energy.
Thank you. It's so abundantly clear. You all bring such a wealth of knowledge to this conversation, so thank you. We're winding down here, though, and so I do want to make sure that I ask a question that's geared directly to help address students' thoughts on things. So for the students in the audience, I'm going to ask our panel, if you look back at your time as a student, is there a course or experience that you often draw upon in your job today? So, Lewis, do you want to start?
Sure. I think one of the most important skills that I learned, that I practice every day, is really communication. I think as a sustainability professional, you really need to work with a wide range of people across all different functions within your organization. And you need to create a space that other people can feel engaged into the conversation. So I guess the specific experience while I was on campus that I think helped with that convening, that communication, is by involving with student organization. I was helping organizing events, organizing energy conference on campus at the Golden Dining Hall. We bringing speakers across different industry, policymakers, to really touch on different aspects and creating space that allow people to convene. I think experiences like that help me to continue to be intentional about a different audience that you have to speak to, and creating space for them. So when I convene for a sustainability task force as well as a committee within our business, I'm intentional on what is the takeaway, how do I get people involved, right? So you have these people that are actually directly working on the sustainability initiative. You want to leverage their knowledge, leverage their subject matter expertise to help you see ahead what that future, the roadmap will look like. So that's what the task force is doing. But then you also have many other people who are interested in sustainability topic in general, but they don't directly work with a specific initiative. How do you engage those associates? How do you create a space for them to knowledge share and still be able to contribute to the topic is important. So that communication, I think, is really key to driving that culture of sustainability within any organization.
Thank you, Lewis. And Brett, how about you?
Yeah, well, being a high school math teacher as a start, obviously it's very interesting. But I remember even when I was teaching, I oftentimes thought, oh man, if only I could have gone out in the real world, because the number of times I told kids, oh, you're going to need this in the future, you better pay attention. Like, it happened all the time, many times over. But what I think I really draw from is, especially from the education classes I had, is just, and this is sustainability, this is everything for the students, it's being able to connect on just the fundamental levels. Because I think oftentimes it's really easy for sustainability and so many of these topics to go so far over the head. And where it really is successful is, whether it's acronyms, whether it's all that stuff, it's trying to just make it simple, because that's the easiest way for folks to get on board. So I know in every course that you have, professors, everything you learn, you'll learn so much. It is a lot like Lewis said, it's how can you boil that down to draw that common connection, because two people are gonna be stronger than you as one. If you can keep on multiplying that, that's I think what all of our jobs are, is we make everybody a little bit of a sustainability professional. That's the important part.
Thank you, Brett. Ashley.
Yeah, communication is key. And sitting here, I don't think I ever would have told you that the communication class that you have to take that's required for you to graduate would have had such an impact until listening to Lewis's thoughts on that. Maybe that's only in the business school that they really stress on communication and presentation. But I think that's key, because that is also a piece. Like, I look at some of the colleagues that I work with that are coming out of the engineering school, and one of the pieces that I talked about, Trane spends a lot of time training. Trane loves to train. Trane loves to bring engineers up to that next level as fast as they can, and as deeply as they can, with as much knowledge as they can put inside of your brain that you can possibly absorb. And it's great, because once you're done with that training, you basically kind of get kicked out into the world, and you have just the right amount of knowledge and just the right amount of fear to feel like you know absolutely everything. And then you go to that first meeting and you're like, I know absolutely nothing. But it gives you an opportunity to listen. And I think about this, like, listening is something that can bring a lot to the table. It helps us better understand what, from my perspective, when I'm meeting with a customer, like, what are they looking for? Because we can communicate as well as we can, but if we don't actually understand and ask questions and be curious about what they're trying to achieve, we can provide them with the most sustainable solution ever that's been, invented at this point in time. But if that's not really what's going to solve their need, if it's not, what's going to create an environment that's better for learning, that's going to create, less sick days and less turnover, within the workplace, or create a conditioned manufacturing space to, reduce, on-site, slips, trips, and falls, what are we really doing? Because just because you need a solution doesn't mean you have the right solution available. And I think that's where, for me being in this position and coming from the business side, not being a full mechanical engineer, it's created a different opportunity for me to have conversations that help bridge some of those gaps. And like we've all talked about, we are these change agents, and we're the people that are going to help bring the collaborators together, help create that environment where people can have an open and honest conversation with each other about what are we trying to achieve and where do we want to go. Because just because this is where we want to go doesn't mean we'll necessarily achieve that. So how do we get there together?
So very, very well said. So do we have time for student? No time for student questions. So I encourage students to find these panelists if they have any questions for a one-on-one.
Yes, 100%.
All right, so that's all the time we have today. Thank you so much, Lewis, Brett, and Ashley for joining us today. And thanks to everyone for being here. We're now moving into a 10-minute break, and please be sure to be back in your seats by 2:40. You won't want to miss a very special performance by Canopy Dance.